Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to the face, the card making space, and more Halloween cards. I will have a link at the end of this video, at the end screen, to my 2024 Halloween playlist. There's already a decent handful of videos. I'm sure there will be many more. For those that aren't aware, hi, I like making Halloween cards. They're just fun. And these ones were really fun. Kind of clean and simple. Very cute. I did some Copic coloring. I haven't used my Copics in a while. I've had people asking about them. Still love my Copics. Had them for years. 15 years? Longer than that. Longer than that. Goodness. Anyway, plenty of videos on my channel using either Copic markers, Olo markers, Spectrum Noir tri-blends. I don't pick favorites. I like to experiment with coloring. So that's that on that. And yeah, as always, links to everything I used are in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keeps the channel going, all the things. And let's get into making some cutesy Halloween cards. So I'm using this really cute Halloween Friends stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. And I have some Simon Says Stamp smooth white 120-pound cardstock, put it in my MISTI. And then I got the images I wanted to use from the set and put them on the cardstock so that I can stamp these with some Intense Block ink, which is an alcohol marker friendly ink. And couldn't flip the cardstock around to stamp everything twice, which is fine because I ended up stamping one of the sentiments on the top portion, and then later I end up just using this like leftover like open space to stamp the little bats from the set as well. So I stamped them onto the cardstock, and then like I mentioned in the intro, I'm coloring these in with Copic markers. And this little bit right at the beginning here is real time. I haven't edited this yet to speed it up to the super fast speedy coloring I do on my edited videos. Because yeah, I don't move this quickly. Some days I really wish I could, but I color at a normal human pace. Now it's all sped up. So yeah, like I was saying in the intro, Copic markers, they're great. I love them. I've been using them for many years. Did I need to get any of the other brands? No, that's something I'm always curious about. And I'm sure I will try out other alcohol marker brands along with all the other coloring methods. It's just something I personally like to do. But a person does not need all the coloring methods or even all the colors. And I know I'm being just ridiculous even saying that because I am someone who needs all the colors of all the things. But pick a few colors of something you like. If you're interested in alcohol markers, pick a few colors that you are personally drawn to, because that's something also I don't really recommend colors. I do have a very old video on my YouTube channel of my most used Copic markers. Again, that video is well over a decade old, I think. But yeah, I don't do color recommendations for people because color is subjective and personal. What my favorites are is not the next person's, and that's also the beauty of it all, and again, you don't need all the colors, especially with Copics. There is a lot, but it's nice to have options. So anywho, I did all my coloring. I went darkest to lightest because again, that's just for me is what I am, comfortable with over the years. But lightest to darkest does give you definitely more control. It'll also depend on what cardstock you're using. I really like, and I have been for years now, using this Simon Says Stamp. It's a 120-pound weight, so it is pretty heavy weight. But other options is like Nina Classic Crest Solar White, the 80-pound, or the 100. Is it 100 or 110-pound? Those were my go-tos before this. A lot of people really like the Hammer Mill for alcohol marker coloring. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I can see the appeal. But I tested it out and it wasn't for me. So I stick with this. This is what works for me. But again, there are many options out there, and that is, in my books, a good thing. So I did all my coloring. I gave them green skin because we got a little witch and a little zombie. I did everything twice. And then I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut them all out. And then pushed them aside so that I could get out my MISTI again. And I've got a piece of black cardstock. And then I've got a couple of the sentiments from the set. And I used my anti-static powder tool on the black cardstock to keep the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped image. And I'm stamping the sentiments with clear embossing ink and just inking them up a couple times and stamping them. It's better to ink up more than once and stamp more than once than to like push really hard on your stamp platform or acrylic block or whatever it is you're using to stamp with. Especially with sentiments or anything with fine detail, I would rather just ink it up, stamp it multiple times. And then after I did that, I coated everything with some detail white embossing powder. And then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool till it is smooth and raised and melted. And then let that cool off. And then I've got a piece of vellum, and I just used an acrylic block for this. So I could stamp the little ghost image in the set, because all the time, or more often than not anyway, I like doing little ghosties in vellum because vellum's transparent, so it just works. So same thing, I use the anti-static powder tool, stamp the little ghosties with that clear embossing ink, detail white embossing powder, melted those, which is very fast on vellum. It moves quick because vellum is just thin. Embossing powder melts extremely quickly, so you just melt it, move on, and you're done. So got those done. I used Simon's Sentiment Label wafer dies to die cut the sentiments. You could also just use a paper trimmer, but I've got the wafer dies. That's more convenient. That's what I'm going to use. And then I used the little coordinating wafer die to die cut my little ghosty. And then it has the little cheek, parts on it. So I'm going to use a Copic marker, and I'm just going to color from the back of the vellum. The thing to remember, if you're using alcohol markers on vellum, you generally need to go darker than you would think, especially if you're coloring on the back of it. That's also what I recommend, just coloring on the back, especially with heat embossing. I don't recommend coloring anything that you've used heat embossing on. There's something in alcohol markers that can react with embossing, like melted embossing powder, and you can actually wreck your markers. So for that reason, and then also it just looks better on vellum. So I used a darker pink and just colored it on the back, so it gave them their little pink cheeks. So after I did that, set those aside. I've got 2 panels of white cardstock, and I just stuck them to one of my grip mats. And then I've got the Simon Says Stamp Web stencil. I've used this in a previous video in my Halloween series, and I think I used it last year too. I forget. It's been out for a while. I love it. It's very delicate. So if you really want it or need it to stay in place, I would recommend like spraying this with like some pixie spray, that sort of a thing. I was fine with this, but I just thought I would mention it. And I've got Concord 9th Grape Soda Ink, because the purple, this shade of purple went with the coloring I did on the images, and a blending brush. And I'm using a very, very light hand. Like, it's another one of those things where it's like, you can't really see what I'm doing. Can't really describe the pressure, but basically no pressure. I was barely tapping the brush in the ink pad, and then very lightly going over the stencil, because I just wanted kind of more of the center area and for it to just fade out to white, because I was going for fairly clean and simple, which I talk about this a lot. That's not really my forte, but I do love it. For me, I actually have to work harder to do clean and simple versus when I throw everything but the kitchen sink at my cards. I find that that's why I appreciate clean and simple so much, because at least for me, in my world, I have to think a lot harder and like be more deliberate and just, and hold myself back. Even here, I'm going to add splatter, but I'm not going to cover this whole piece with splatter, and I'm only going to use one kind, not 4. So after I did that bit of ink blending, I stuck the panels into my splat box, and I'm using black soot distress paint, put it on my little palette, picked it up with my fan brush, and trying very hard to, do just a light amount. I did more on the second piece, so I gave myself permission to add a bit more to the first piece. And then I just had to let that dry. As always with distress paint, and especially black soot distress paint, wash your brush immediately, etc., because that stuff dries permanently. Like, you do not want to wreck your brushes or, get that stuff anywhere. So washed everything out, let my backgrounds dry. I used my paper trimmer to trim the sentiment strip on an angle just to give it that little extra something. And then I'm adhering everything with just craft tacky glue. And off camera, I had figured out my layout. Again, I had to, put some time and some deliberation into everything, because just clean and simple is just not in my wheelhouse, but it's fun, to try different things. So adhered all my little elements, the little ghosty. I'd only put adhesive along the bottom where I could hide it behind the little zombie, because adhesive shows through vellum. Plus, doing it this way, the ghost is popped up just a teeny bit, because vellum will curl a tiny bit depending on how much adhesive you add. So it gives it its own kind of natural dimension, as if it's floating off, behind the little characters. And then, yeah, like I'd mentioned, I stamped the little bats just on the leftover cardstock from the images when I'd colored them. So I stamped the bats with that same black ink and then die cut them with the coordinating wafer dies. And then the remaining little images and the second sentiment, I'm adhering to the insides of my cards. My card bases are top folding A2 white note cards. And I adhered the sentiment, that little kitty cat, and the little pumpkin. And I'm going to stamp the bats onto the inside of the card just to give it that little extra something. And then the card front panels, I'm going to adhere to the card bases with Simon's Big Mama foam tape to give it, again, just a smidge more dimension. And then I pulled out my white jelly roll pen to add little dots and highlights wherever I thought they would look cute. I'm not following any sort of light source, anything like that. It was wherever it's going to look cute. I added little dots to the bats, for eyes, just to give it a little extra something. And then just, went around and added just random little dots, random little lines. It just gives it that little extra something. And I did the same thing on the inside as well to the little bats and the little characters that I adhered. And then as a final bit of embellishment, these are the mermaid tail. Is that mermaid tail? Yeah, mermaid tail confetti mix. I pulled out the green ones from the mix and then put those onto each of these cards just to finish everything off. So adhere them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue, just picking them up with my embellishment wand. And then I just got to let the glue dry, and these cards are complete. So cutesy little scenes with, I still managed to, get a bit of splatter in there and still kept them fairly clean and simple. Just fun. And the little ghost popping up. Love him. I think he's just the cutest little thing. And that web stencil is, I love it. I love it so much. So anyway, like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below the video, so you can just expand that and check it out if you are interested. And then at the very end, I'll link to the 2024 Halloween playlist. And that's it from me for the moment. I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in supporting me over on Patreon, the link to that is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye.